Yomא Perek Hey Mishnah Aleph. Hotziu leis hakaf es hamachta v'chafan melei chafna v'nosan l'sei hakaf hagadol l'fi godloi v'katl l'fi kadnoi. The Mishnah returns to the description of how the Kohen Gadol was maktir the Keteris and Yom Kippur. We learned in the previous parak that after he filled a shovel with gecholim, with coals from the Mizbeach, he put the shovel down on the floor near the Kodesh, and the next job was to take the Keteris out of a different shovel and to put it onto a golden ladle. Seems confusing, but let's follow through with this. They brought the empty ladle and the shovel of Keteris out to him. He scooped up as much Keteris from the shovel as his cupped hands could hold. He cupped both of his hands together and scooped up the Keteris with them, and put it in a ladle. The amount of Keteris that the Kohen Gadol took depended on his size. A large man scooped up a large amount according to the size of his large hands. And a small man scooped up a small amount according to the size of his small hands. And that was the amount of keteris that was burnt inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And what was the point of the Mishnah telling us this? So, the Mishnah adds this idea to teach that the Kohen Gadol used his cupped hands later as well, inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. After entering the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kohen Gadol poured the keteris from the ladle back into his hands, and then poured it from his hands into the shovel of the gecholim, of the coals. Here the Mishnah teaches that just as he was required to take the keteris from the shovel with his cupped hands, so too he was required to pour it from the ladle into his cupped hands and not onto some other keli. After he put the keteris in the ladle, the Kohen Gadol carried the ladle and the shovel of coals into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So he took the shovel of coals in his right hand and the ladle of keteris in his left hand, and entered the Kodesh. Since the keteris is more important than the coals, he should have carried the keteris in his right hand and the coals in his left hand. That was not practical because he would then have to carry the heavy and hot shovel of coals in his weaker left hand, so you put that in the right hand. He walked through the Kodesh until he reached the opening between the two curtains that separated the Kodesh from the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and there was a 1 amma space between the curtains. The Heichel is divided into two parts. You have the Kodesh, which has the Shulchan, the Mizbeach, HaZohav, and the Menorah, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The two curtains stood between these two rooms. The reason why one curtain was not enough is as follows. In the first base of Mikdash, the Kodesh was separated from the Kodesh HaKadoshim by a wall that was amma thick. When they built the second base of Mikdash, they couldn't build a wall there because the Kodesh in the second base of Mikdash was much higher, and a wall that was just 1 amma thick wouldn't have been sturdy enough if it would be built to that height. So in its place, they wanted to hang a curtain like they did in the Mishkan. However, the Chacham didn't know whether the amma of space where the wall had stood was part of the Kodesh or part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. If it would be part of the Kodesh, so then the curtain would have to be hung on the more western side of the amma wide space, and if it was part of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the curtain had to belong on the more Mizrach side. So to solve the problem, they hung two curtains, one on each side of the amma wide space. So if anybody ever asks you, was there a wall in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or was there a curtain in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the correct answer would be the first base of Mikdash had a wall, the second base of Mikdash had a curtain. Right? If you look in the Gemara Shabbos and Moed Katan, where the Gemara talks about Shlomo HaMelech being machnas the Aron into the Kodesh HaKadoshim when he built the base of Mikdash, it said that the dalses, the doors of the Kodesh HaKadoshim swung open, right? So if it had a curtain, how was the doors? The Torah says it's not a question. The first base of Mikdash had doors, and a wall. The second base of Mikdash had curtains. Ayin Igros Moshe Chelak Aleph. In the back, there's a bunch of Chuvas on Inyan Kachim. I believe it's Simon Beis where Moshe discusses this over there. Rabbi Yossi says Lehoz Hashem al Pareiches Achas Vilvad. Rabbi Yossi says there's only one pareiches, one curtain. Shenema, like the pasuk says, "Ve'evdila pareiches lechem ben hakodesh ben kodesh hakadoshim." A curtain shall divide between the kodesh and the kodesh hakadoshim. Rabbi Yossi learns from the Mishkan that only one curtain is permitted. Therefore, when the second base of Mikdash was built, they had to make a single curtain that was 1 amma thick. How do you make a curtain that's 1 amma thick? I don't know, but the Mishnah at the end of Shkalim says that the huge, massive curtain that they made for the Kodesh HaKadoshim, for the Pareiches, was a guzma. It was so big that when we talk about it in the and the shear of it, and how to take it off to be metahar it, and how to dry it, chulu, the Gemara says it's a guzma. But maybe it's not such a guzma because it was very, very large. I mean, in a certain sense it was, in a certain sense it wasn't. Hachitzayna has a proof of an adar. Back to the Tanakama now describes the entrance to the Kodesh HaKodashim and continues the Seder Advarim of the Kohen Gadol. So Hachitzayna is a proof of an adar. The outer one, the curtain to the east, that was closer to the Kodesh, was folded back and fastened at the south and created an opening which the Kohen Gadol could enter the space between the two curtains. And the inner one, the curtain to the west, which was closer to the Kodesh HaKodashim, was folded back and fastened at the north to create an opening through which the Kohen Gadol could enter the Kodesh HaKodashim. Mahalach beineim ad shemagel etzavan. The Kohen Gadol went through the opening at the south. He walked between the curtains until he reached the opening at the north. He gel etzafan haifich panav ladarim. When he reached the opening at the north, he entered the Kodesh HaKodashim and turned towards the south. So basically, if you're facing when the Kohen Gadol walks into the Kodesh and he's facing the Kodesh HaKodashim, so he goes all the way to the left. That's where he enters into the space, into the hallway, so to speak, between the two curtains, and he turns from the left and goes all the way to the right. And then when he gets to that end over there, there's an opening there for him to go into the Kodesh HaKodashim. So he enters the Kodesh HaKodashim on the right side. So he when he reached the opening at the north, he enters the Kodesh HaKodashim and walks towards the south. And he starts walking back towards the left. He walks southward with the curtain on his left and the Aron on his right until he reached the northern pole of the Aron. When he reached the northern pole of the Aron, he placed a shovel of keteris on the floor between the two poles. The Aron was located in the center of the Kodesh HaKodashim, and there were horizontal poles that were attached to the Aron, the bottom, one on the northern side and one on the southern side. The poles extended all the way to the eastern side of the room, meaning they stuck through the pareiches. Our Mishnah is definitely describing what happened in the second Beis HaMikdash, since that was the only Mikdash that had two curtains. However, there was no Aron in the second Beis HaMikdash, as we're going to see in the following Mishnah. We must therefore say that the Mishnah refers to the place where the Aron and the bottom used to be, as we're going to explain in the next Mishnah. He then poured the keteris from the ladle onto his cupped hands. The Kohen Gadol had to hold the ladle with his teeth or his fingertips and tip its contents over into his cupped hands, which was one of the most difficult avodas in the Mikdash. It was a avodah kasha sheba Mikdash. So now he's in there, and now he's being makted the keteris in the Kodesh HaKodashim. This is the highlight of the year. Then he heaped the keteris from his hands onto the coals, and he waited until the entire room of the Kodesh HaKodashim was filled with smoke. He left the Kodesh HaKodashim the way that he entered. Instead of turning around, he walked backwards with his face towards the Aron, and he walked back out. He backed out the way that he came in. So he goes all the way to the right, walks backward, goes through these curtains, and then exits all the way on the left. And he recited a short tefillah in the outer chamber in the Kodesh. It wasn't in the Kodesh HaKodashim, it was in the Kodesh. And we mentioned in the previous parak that nobody was allowed to be in the Beis HaMikdash period. No one was allowed to be in the Kodesh either when the Kohen Gadol was in the Kodesh HaKodashim. So nobody was there when he davened. And he said a very short tefillah, so as not to frighten the Jewish people who in the event of a delay might be afraid that he died. And this is what he said. This was the tefillah. This is how the Gemara explains it. That this year should be warm. Should have a lot of rain. And the leadership of the nation should not pass from the Malchus Beis David from Beis Yehuda. It's very interesting because the Chashmonaim, just Am Ha'ara, the Chashmonaim were Kohanim, and they took over the Beis Yehuda. They took over the Malchus of Malchus Beis David, and there were big tainas on them. That's why, even though they stood up for quite Shemayim the times of the Matzis Yo, but Lamaisa at the end, most of them didn't survive. You state in Ramban and Parashas Vayechil, they also Shevet Yehuda. Either way, and your nation should not need each other's support for financial support, and definitely not from another nation. And the prayers of travelers to stop the rain shouldn't be accepted. Why? The travelers daven that it shouldn't rain, so that they could get home and not get washed away. But Lamaisa, at the end of the day, Klal Yisrael needs rain. They need parnosa. Mela, they daven that they shouldn't daven, that the tefillas of the Evrei Drachim shouldn't daven. And I believe that there's a Targum Yenison that says that the Kohen Gadol also daven that there shouldn't be any Ritzichas that year, even B'Shoigeg, because the Ritzeach B'Shoigeg had to go to the Ir Miklat, and he was stuck in the Ir Miklat until Ad Shemesa Kohen Gadol. So they shouldn't die. They shouldn't daven that to wait for him to die. Many Kahana Gedolim died in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, either because they were not fit for the position or because they didn't do the service properly. So Kadesh Lahabis Es Yisrael, even though that's a spit to the whole year, but the concept of not making people nervous is even greater than that. That's what we see from this Mishnah, and the Balei Musar talk about this. So, all right. Mishnah base. Mishnitala Aaron, when the Aaron was taken by Nebuchadnezzar, the general of Bavel who destroyed the first base of Mikdash, Evan Haisashami Moisnevim Harishainim. All that was left there was a stone which had been discovered before the base of Mikdash was built in the days of the first Nevi'im, which means the Shmuel HaNavi and David HaMelech, because the Gemara says that that David had drawn up the plans, and he sat with a Chumash with Shmuel HaNavi to figure out the Mokum to build the Beis HaMikdash, because the Torah doesn't tell us where the Mokum HaMikdash is. It just says Al-Nachlav, Al-Menucha, and all sorts of other psukim that are all merames, but the idea is to give a tshuka to try to figure out what the place was. But it refers to Shmuel and David as the Nevi'im Harishainim, which Shia Haisanikris, and it was called Shia, which means foundation. Dr. Rav Hashem Shemimena Nishtasa Olam, Shebo Yosar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Esailamai. Shtia means the Yesod, because it was the foundation of the world. Hashem created the Evan Hashtia and then attached clods of earth to it from every side until the world was formed. Now we know, it's interesting, the Rambam writes in Hilchos Beis HaBechira, and Perek Beis Halacha Beis, the Adam Mimakam Kaparosei Nivra, that the mensch was created in the Makam of Mizbeach. It's very interesting. It's not too far off from the place where the world itself was built. The world itself was created. That's the Makam Aaron. So the Makam Aaron, the Olam was Hushtas, and the Makam Mizbeach is the Makam where Adam was Nivra. And Torah is called Tushia, which is the same as the Evan Hashia. So steht in Gemara, look in Sanhedrin Daf Chaf Vav Amud Beis. Ushtia Haisanikris. Gavayim and Aarat Shalosh Etzbais. It protruded 3 Etzbais from the ground. V'Allah Hayanoisin. And upon it, this stone, that's where the Kohen Gadol placed a shovel of coals and burnt the Ketores. The previous Mishnah learned that the Ketores was burnt in front of the Aron between the two Badim. It seems therefore the part of the Evan Hashti extended in front of the Aron, and it was on this part that the Kohen Gadol burnt the Ketores. Mishnah Gimel. So now he leaves the Kodesh HaKadosh. In the meantime, while the Kohen Gadol was involved with the Ketores, the Kohen was standing in the courtyard in the Azara and stirring the blood of the parah and the parah that it shouldn't congeal. After the Kohen Gadol finishes his the service of the Ketores and recited the Tefillah, he left the Kodesh and resumed the Avodah Sapar. It's interessant. What happened to the rest of the Avodah? The Kohen Gadol died. I guess this guy, Kohen Gadol, takes him over. I guess that was the Avodah here. So not less Adam Misha Mamaris, but he takes the blood of the bull from the one that was stirring it and returns to the Kodesh. Nichnas l'makom she'nichnas, v'omad b'makom she'omad. He enters a place he entered before the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and stands in the place that he stood before between the two Badei Aaron. Mehiza mimenu achas l'maylav shevel l'mata. He sprinkled some of the dam once upward and 7 times downward in the direction of the kapiras, which was the cover of the Aaron. He dipped his right forefinger into the dam and cast the blood in the required direction. For the one upward sprinkling, he faced his palm upward. For the 7 downward sprinklings, his palm faced downward. Each sprinkling needed a separate dipping of the finger into the dam. That's how he was maza the dam. The kapiras was a board of solid gold that was 1 tefach thick that rested on top of the aron. In the first Beis HaMikdash, when the aron was there, the Kohen Gadol aimed the dam in the direction of the kapiras. In the second Beis HaMikdash, he aimed them in the direction of the place where it used to be. That's interesting because if you think about it, there were no lights in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So how did the Kohen Gadol know where to go? So the Gemara Rishana says that the aron gave off a tremendous light. It was the Kodesh HaKadoshim. There was no question that there was light there. It was a ruchnistic light. It wasn't a physical light. However, he didn't aim to sprinkle in the upper part of the kapiras or in the lower part. He didn't throw the blood so far that it actually reached the kapiras. Instead, he cast the blood onto the floor, and the first spot from far from himself, and the next 7 spots, sprinklings progressively closer to himself, like one who whips a person, starting from the top of his back, or working progressively downward. Although the Torah says that he should take the dam hapar and should sprinkle it with his finger on top of the aron and the kapiras, he should sprinkle 7 times in front of the kapiras. This doesn't mean that the blood must actually reach any part of the kapiras. Rather, the words on top of the Alpanei kapiras teach that he must sprinkle once upward, and the words 7 times in front of the kapiras teach that he must sprinkle 7 times downward. In the upward sprinkling, the Kohen Gadol tossed the dam onto a part of the floor that was relatively far from where he was standing. In the first of the 7 downward sprinklings, he made the blood land nearer to himself, and in the second of the 7 downward sprinklings, he made the blood fall even nearer, and so on. He continued in this way until he created a line of 8 spots of blood between the aron and himself. The Mishnah compares this to an official of the Beis Din who administers malchus. He begins by striking the top of the back between the shoulders, then he strikes somewhat lower, and so on. I always understood this to mean that kimatzlif doesn't necessarily mean that it would be in a line like higher and lower or further to closer, but it meant the motion of his hand was similar to the way that they would whip in Beis Din, but apparently that's not the pshat. Obviously, in the world of the Maral, they say a lot of Torah over here that there's the Echad Reichev al Shiva, there's the one, which is referencing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the which on Yom Kippur is also referencing to the Kohen Gadol, that's Reichev al Shiva, that's overriding all nature, that the whole nature, the whole mitzvahs of nature is subjected to the Teva, to the Kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to the Kohen Gadol, because Yom Kippur is a day when we're totally removed from any type of Gashmias, because the Tanugim of Ruchnias that we're connected with on that day gives us sustenance, and we don't need to have physical sustenance from this world, but we can get our body can be sustained by a non-physical Ruchnias sustenance. And he would count the sprinkling as follows. Achas. When he made the 1 upward sprinkling, he said 1. Achas. And then when he went to the 7 downward sprinklings, he said 1. Achas v'achas. Achas v'shtayim. Achas v'sholosh. Achas v'arba. Achas v'chomesh. Achas v'shesh. Achas v'sheva. And then he said 1 and 7 times. And counting each one of the 7 downward sprinklings, he said 1 before the appropriate number. This was the reason why he did that. The Kohen Gadol is not supposed to count all 8 sprinklings together, 1 through 8. Rather, after counting the 1 upward sprinkling, he started a new count for the 7 downward sprinklings, 1 through 7. This could lead to confusion, however. After counting the first upward sprinkling as 1, he might mistakenly count the first downward sprinkling as 2, and the second as 3, and so on until he counts the 6th as 7. He might just leave out the last hazah. To avoid this confusion about the hazah, he said achas, referring to the single upward sprinkling before each time he counted a downward sprinkling, in order to remind himself that he had to do 7 sheva hazois besides the 1 that he did l'mayla. Yotzav hinichal kan hazav shebehechel. After he completed the sprinklings, he went out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim and put the kli that contained the blood upon a golden stand in the Kodesh. Mishnah Daled. They brought him the he-goat from the Shar Nicanor, where it had been standing since the Garul, to the area between the Mizbeach and the Kodesh, the Heichal. once he places the vessel on the stand in the Heichal, Kohen Gadol went to the Azar where he performed the avodah of the soyer that was the Chatos Lashem. So Shachta Kibel b'Mizra Kastama, he shechted and poured its blood in a bowl. Nichnas Hamakush and Nichnas Vamad Makush Amad, took the blood back into the Kodesh and once again entered the place that he entered before, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, stood in the place that it stood before, between the two Badei Aaron. And sprinkled some of the blood once upward and 7 times downward in the direction of the Kapiris. He didn't aim to sprinkle on the upper part of the Kapiris or on the lower part. He didn't throw the blood so far that it actually had to reach the Kapiris El Kamatzlif. Same exact thing as before. Instead, he cast the blood onto the floor. The first sprinkling onto a spot far from himself, the next 7 sprinklings progressively closer to himself, like one who whips a person, starting from the top of his back and working progressively downward, as we explained in the previous Mishnah. And this is how he would count. Achas, achas, yachas, achas, ushtayim, achas, ushalosh, achas, yarba, achas, uchomish, achas, ushesh, achas, usheva. When he made the 7 downward sprinklings, he said 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, 1 and 7. He then completed the sprinklings, went out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and put the klishares that contained the dam upon a second golden stand in the Heichal, and then he took the blood, the dam hapar, from its stand in preparation for the next part of the avodah. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda says there's only one stand which held only one bowl. Not al dam hapar v'niach dam hasar. So he took the dam hapar from the stand and he put down the dam hasar. And the Mishnah goes weiter with the Seder avodah. He sprinkled some of the dam hapar towards the part of the curtain that's opposite the aron from the outside meaning when he was standing outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He didn't aim to sprinkle on the upper part of the curtain or on the lower part of the curtain. He didn't throw the blood so far that it actually reached the curtain. Instead, he cast the blood onto the floor, the first sprinkling onto a spot far from himself, the next 7 sprinklings progressively closer to himself, like one who whips, as explained earlier. And he would count the same way. Achas. When he made the 1 upward sprinkling, he said 1. Then when he started doing the 7 downward sprinklings, he did achas, he did achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'shalosh, achas v'arba, achas v'chomesh, achas v'sheva. Natal dam hasar v'nich dam hapar. After the sprinklings of the dam hapar, he took the dam hasar and he put down the dam hapar. This part of the Mishnah follows the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that there was only one kan. The Kohen Gadol therefore had to pick up the bowl that was already there, which contained the dam hasar, before he put down the bowl that he was holding, which contained the dam hapar. As he did with the dam hapar, he sprinkled some of the dam hasar towards part of the curtain, towards part of the pareches that was connected to Aron B'Bachutz, that was opposite the Aron from the outside. Achas l'mayla b'sheva l'mata, sprinkling upwards and 7 downwards. By the way, we say all this in the Avodah of Yom Kippur. So if you look in your Machzor, you'll see all of this, and it's just very interesting how the piyut is written. It's actually very, very different nuschais and different sidurim. But I believe the Nusach Ashkenaz has more hishtachavoyis. So achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'shalosh, achas v'arba, achas v'chomish, achas v'shesh, achas v'sheva. Now, after completing this spritzach, having finished sprinkling the soyer on the pareches, towards the pareches of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he poured the remaining dam from the par into the bowl of the dam hasoyer. And then he poured the contents of the full bowl into the empty bowl in order to mix them well. And that's the end of Mishnah Dal. Mishnah Hay starts v'yatza lamizbeach asher lifnei Hashem zeh mizbeach hazahav. The Torah says he shall go out to the mizbeach that's before Hashem. He shall take some of the dam of the par and some blood of the he-goat and place it on the corners of the mizbeach all around. Zeh mizbeach hazahav. This is referring to the mizbeach hazahav, the inner mizbeach, which was the mizbeach lifnei Hashem in the Kodesh. Although the pasuk says you should go out to the mizbeach, it doesn't mean that the Kohen Gadol shall leave the Kodesh and go out to the Azara, to the Mizbeach HaChitzon. Rather, it means that from his current position between the Paroiches and the Mizbeach HaPnimi, he should go to the far side. He should go to the other side of the Mizbeach, which is closer to the entrance of the Kodesh as opposed to standing on the other side. He began to purify the Mizbeach by applying the dam to the Mizbeach. He was metaher the Mizbeach by smearing a line of blood on each of its corners with a downward stroke of the finger. The 4 karnos on Mizbeach, or 4 horns in the shape of cubes, were attached to the top of the Mizbeach HaPnimi, one in each corner. The Kohen Gadol smeared the blood by moving his finger downward from the top part of the Karen to the bottom, so his finger ended up below his palm. He didn't go upward, because if he did, he would finish with his finger above his palm, and some blood might run down his palm into his sleeve. And this avodah that's done when his clothing is dirty is no good. So you have to be careful to not be metan of the begodah more than is necessary for the avodah. From where did he start? That is, on which corner did he apply the dam first? He started from the northeastern corner of the inner Mizbeach, that went in the following order. He started from the Mizrachas Tzvainis, the northeast. Then he went to northwest. Tzvainis Maravas, Maravas Dremis, Dremis Mizrachas. Northwest, southwest, southeast. The order stated above, starting at the northeast and ending at the southeast, was required not only for the Par and Sar of Yom Kippur, but also for any other Chatas HaPnimi, which is any kind of Chatas that the dam is brought on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. There are 2 types of Chatois, which we believe we mentioned this in Masechta Pesachim, and could be we mentioned it earlier, even Masechta Yomah, that there are 2 types of Chatois. The outer ones, whose dam was applied to the corners of the outside Mizbeach, and the inner ones, whose dam was Huza or Huzrak on the inner Mizbeach. The outer ones were the regular Chatas Karbanos brought by a person who did Aver B'Shegeg, and the Karban Musaf, the Chatas of the Musafim. The inner Chatas, the Chatas HaPnimi, is the Par Kayin Mashiach, and the Par Halam Davar Shal Tzibur, and the Sarah Avodah Zarah. These 3 Karbanos are considered Chatas HaPnimis, and they have the dam on the Mizbeach HaPnimi. The Malkum Shu Maschel B'Chatas Al Mizbeach HaChitzim Misham Yagarm Al Mizbeach HaPnimi. The order stated above in the Mishnah, meaning starting in the northeast and ending at the southeast, was required not only for the Par V'Sar of Yom Kippur, but also for any other Chatas HaPnimi. So the last corner for all these Karbanos was the one on the southeast. So based on this rule, the Mishnah makes a general observation. The place of the Mizbeach HaChitzon where one started making the dam of a regular Chatas HaChitzon, meaning the southeast corner, is the place in the Mizbeach HaPnimi where one finished making the applications of dam on the Chatas HaPnimi. The Kohen who applied the dam of the Chatas, the regular Chatas, went up the ramp of the Mizbeach, turned to his right, and smeared blood on the first corner he reached, which was the southeastern corner. He continued counterclockwise around the Mizbeach, from the southeast to the northeast, to the northwest, and to the southwest. However, the Kohen who applied the dam in the Mizbeach HaPnimi began at the northeastern corner, and going counterclockwise, finished at the southeastern corner. So the southeastern corner was a place where the dam of the Chatas HaChitzon began, and that was the same place where the Chatas HaPnimi ended. Okay. Rabbi Lezer says, according to the Tanna Kama, this Mishnah, Kohen Gadol walked around the Mizbeach from corner to corner and applied the dam each time with a downward stroke. Rabbi Lezer's Chelik. Rabbi Lezer says he stood in one place in the northeastern corner and was mechate and smeared the dam on the Mizbeach by smearing all the corners from that same spot. Rabbi Lezer holds that instead of walking around the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the Kohen Gadol remained next to one corner and stretched his arm to smear the dam on all 3 corners. This is possible because the Mizbeach HaPnimi was only an amma square, which is maybe 2 by 2 feet. It was relatively small, and it wasn't that tall either, so the Kohen Gadol was able to reach over it and smear the dam on all the other sides. And he applied from the bottom to the top on all of the corners, except on the northeastern corner, which was directly in front of him, where he applied the dam from the top to the bottom. Since the Kohen Gadol stretched his arm over the Mizbeach to smear the dam on the last 3 corners, the angle of his arm was such that even if he moved his finger upward from the bottom part of the current to the top part, the blood wouldn't drip onto his sleeve, and he finished. At the corner where he was standing, however, if he would smear the dam upward, he would finish with his finger above his palm and might trip onto his sleeve. At this corner, therefore, he used a downward stroke so as not to get on his sleeve. Okay. Mishnah Vav. Hiza al taharay shal mizbeach sheva pa'amim. After the Kohen Gadol applied the dam to the corners, he sprinkled dam on a clean area on top of the inner mizbeach 7 times. The Kohen Gadol pushed the coals and ashes to the sides and then sprinkled the dam 7 times in this exposed gold. Then he went out to the Azara and poured the Shiari Hadam, the remaining blood, onto the western side of the Yisoid of the Mizbeach HaChitzon. The Mizbeach HaChitzon was built upon a broad base that extended 1 amma beyond the Mizbeach like a step. The Kohen Gadol poured the remaining dam onto the western side of the Yisoid because this was the side that was closest to him when he came out of the Heichal. Likewise, the remaining dam of the Chatayis HaPnimiyos is also poured onto the western side of the base. However, the remaining dam of the regular Chatayis HaChitzoniyos, whose blood is applied on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, is poured onto the southern side of the base, on a different side. Once he applied the dam of a Chatayis HaChitzon on the Karnas HaMizbeach, meaning the Mizbeach HaChitzon, the Kohen went down the Kevesh, went down the ramp, which was to the south of the Mizbeach. He therefore poured the remaining dam on the southern side of the base, since that was the side that was closest to him. Elu ve'elu mis'arvim ba'ama v'yotzin l'nachal kidrein v'nukam l'gananon l'zevel l'maylam behem. After they poured onto the base, the blood of the Chatayis HaPnimiyos and the Chatayis HaChitzoniyos joined in the canal that ran through the Azara and flowed out to the Nachal Kidron, where they were sold by the Gizbarim of the Beis HaMikdash to gardeners to use as fertilizer in their gardens, and one who uses them without paying for them from the Beis HaMikdash is considered an Isser Me'ilah, which is also. The Torah forbids having benefit from any sacred items, which is an Isser called Me'ilah. However, the Isser Deraisa of Me'ilah does not apply to the blood discussed here, since the service has been completed. It is therefore Asr only Midrabanan. When an item owned by the Beis HaMikdash is sold, its Kedusha is transferred to the money, and the item itself is no longer subject to the Isra of Me'ilah. In the case of our Mishnah, therefore, once the gardeners paid for the dam, they were allowed to use it as fertilizer. Mishnah Zayin. Kol Ma'aseh Yom Kippur Ma'omer Ala Seder Im Hikta Ma'aseh Lachaver Le'osa Klum. This is the rule, this is the klal for all the avodas of Yom Kippur that I mentioned in the previous Mishnayos in specific order. This is all the avodas HaKohen Gadol when he's doing Big Day Lavan in the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. If the Kohen Gadol did one procedure before another, which was supposed to come first, he accomplished nothing. The procedure he performed too early is not good. It must be performed again in the correct place in the sequence. For example, if he sprinkled the blood of the sar towards the paraychas and the kodesh before he sprinkled the dam par there, he must sprinkle the dam sar again after he sprinkled the dam par. If the blood of the par or the sar spilled before he finished a set of 8 applications in the Kedesh HaKadoshim of the dam, he must bring other blood. He must go out to the Azara and shecht another bull or sar and repeat the Hazois in the Kedesh HaKadosh from the beginning of the unfinished set. The dam par was sprinkled 8 times in the Kedesh HaKadoshim, and so was the dam hasar. Each carbon really had 8 hazois. For example, if the blood of the sar spills after 3 of the 8 hazois, the Kohen Gadol must shecht a new sar and perform the 3 hazois again, plus the remaining 5. And the same is true if the blood of the par or the sar spilled before he finished a set of 8 hazois towards the parachas there in the Kaidish 2. Here too, you must shecht another animal and go back to the beginning of the interrupted set. And the same is true if the mixed blood of the dam hasar and the dam par spilled before you finish the set of 11 hazois on the mizbeach hapnimi. In this case, he shechts both a par and the sar, mixes the dam, and uses the mixture to repeat the uninterrupted set. Shekulun kapar b'fnei atzma. There was only one set on the mizbeach hazav, which consisted of 4 hazois to the corners and 7. There was 1 hazah on each corner and then 7 hazois on the top after he cleared out the coals. However, it's not necessary to repeat any previous set that was already completed because every set is its own chelek of kapara. Once a set has been finished, its purpose has been achieved. Therefore, even if the blood of a new animal is used for the next set, the first set is not repeated. Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon Aimer, mimakom shepasak misham hu maschil. From the place in the set where he stopped, that's where he starts again. So if he started a set and the blood spilled before he finished it, he continues from where he stopped. For example, if the dam hasar spilled after 3 of the 8 hasais inside the Kedesh HaKadoshim, he shechts another sar and he begins from number 4. He doesn't go back to the beginning of the set and perform the first 3 sprinklings again. According to these Tanoim, each hazah is a mitzvah in its own right, which have been done once, does not need to be repeated. Ad kan Masechta Yomah Perek Hey.